We will go ahead and start then. And this is the Ride and Tie webinar for AERC staff and ride managers. And my name is Courtney Kruger, and I'll have a little more introduction in just a minute or two. But we want to are so thankful for the new partnership affiliation that we have with AERC, and want you to learn a little bit about Ride and Tie, and also to learn a little bit about how I really think this affiliation is going to be so beneficial for both Ride and Tie and AERC, and assuming that ride managers have the space for extra competitors, there's just no reason not to do a Ride and Tie, and you will find that out later. So let's start a little bit with what we're going to do this evening. Welcome to everybody. We have several panelists, and then Lonnie Newcomb and I are going to be your masters of ceremony, I guess. And a panelist, if you guys will just jump in anytime you need to. And in just a moment, I'll give you a chance to introduce yourselves. If you have any questions, there is a chat feature you should see down there at the bottom of your screen. Click on that and type in a question. And at the end, we will try to answer those questions. And really, I hope the Q&A will be our most important time, because I want to know what you need to know to make this happen for you. We are recording this, and so you can go back and look at it, or you can refer others to it. AERC will get us the links for where that'll be. If you don't mind, mute yourself if you are one of the panelists, just to keep the background noise down, and then you can unmute yourself when you need to. And so again, this is to give ideas and information so that you can add Ride and Tie to your endurance event. And I hope by the end, you're going to be excited about the opportunities that you have to do that. So we're going to first do some introductions. And so Lonnie, if you will, tell us a little about yourself, and then I'll tell a little about myself, and then we'll let our panelists talk.
Hi, I'm Lonnie Newcomb. I'm from Virginia, and I'm the one that when people look at me, they all say, "Oh, I could do that." That's mainly my job in Ride and Tie. We did our first Ride and Tie in 1983, and we started, my partner Kathy Broadus and I, we started going out to doing the championships in 1997, and have had just a really terrific time going out west and meeting the people out in California and seeing some pretty terrific places out there. And we do endurance as well, and we find that it's a terrific blend to do Ride and Tie with endurance, and to do it's a great combination, because it gives the endurance riders something to look at, something to laugh at, something to think, oh, I'd best not complain because they're sitting here running right next to me. And it's just it really helps the Ride and Tires to be with the endurance riders, because it gives us a lot of company out there out on the trail. So we've been doing this for 20, 30 years, something like that, and have loved every minute of it.
Thank you. And I'm Courtney Kruger, and I never was on a horse until 2011. And my daughter and my wife were endurance riders. My daughter was 14 at the time, and they did their thing and I did my thing. And my thing was mountain biking, and their thing was horseback riding. And we lived at that time, I'm in Tennessee now, but we lived just outside of Clemson, South Carolina. And the Clemson Forest had multi-use trails. And so we did it together. They would ride and I would bike, and everybody was happy until my daughter at 14 found Ride and Tie, heard about it. And she came to me and she said, "Dad, if you will learn to ride a horse, I will start running and we can be a Ride and Tie team." And if your 14-year-old daughter says, "Hey, I want to be on a team with you," the answer is yes. And so that's how I got into Ride and Tie. She then grew up, and she's gone off to college and has now graduated college, and she doesn't participate that much, doesn't have the time anymore, but now I am just completely hooked, both to horses and to Ride and Tie. And I've done a fair amount of endurance, not a lot, but a fair amount. And so but that is a great example of how many Ride and Tie folks come into it through endurance, and it goes the other direction as well. I am the sanctioning officer for Ride and Tie, and so I'm the one that you'll be dealing with, both with paperwork and stuff, but much more importantly, I'm the one you deal with any questions you might have. I want to help, and I'm more than willing to help. So if our panelists will tell us a little bit about you, who you are, and what your purpose is, and why you're here, and maybe even how you got into Ride and Tie. Janelle, you want to start? I guess I'll call on you.
Sure. I have been a ride manager for about 15 years, And I mostly do the Bandit Springs ride in Central Oregon. I have I've substitute ride managed for a number of other rides as well. And it almost seemed like almost from the first year, Annie Betts asked me if I would consider doing a ride and tie at the endurance ride. And I said, sure, why not? You know, you ride horses, you run, which is crazy when you could have a perfectly good horse to ride, but sure, why not? And we've had a ride and tie, we've sanctioned a ride and tie almost every year for the last maybe 12 or 13, 14 years. And we don't always get riders. In the first few years, we got a lot more riders. We held the national champion or the world championship there one year. But we always enjoy the crazy ride and tires coming to join us.
Carol, tell us about you.
I started endurance riding in 1987 or 89 or something like that, and have several thousand miles of endurance and competitive trail combined. And I started ride managing somehow. I don't know how that quite happened, but it did. And somebody called me up. I'd been wanting to add ride and tie, and Janice called me up and said, "Can we do it at JD's? We want to do 100." All right, sure, why not? And added it, and then I suckered a couple other ride managers, if I was secretary or just helping, suckered a couple other ride managers into adding it. And it's been a great blend with endurance and also with the competitive trail rides. And I think we had our first ride and tie probably in 1984 in Florida, before I actually started competing. Long time ago in Jacksonville.
And Melissa, tell us about you.
Well, I'm both an endurance rider and a ride and tire. I was first an endurance rider, and I think ride and tie just adds a great lot of fun and a mix to the ride. My husband and I have also added ride and ties to some of the endurance rides that we manage out west, and it was just really a great addition to the ride. It added a whole another level of fun and excitement to the event, and so I'm really excited that AERC is joining up with Ride and Tie. I think it'll make a great partnership, because I think Ride and Tie just adds a lot of fun to an endurance ride. So we've managed both endurance rides and Ride and Ties. We've participated in both, and I have to say Ride and Tie is just a lot of fun, and I would really want to encourage ride managers to think about adding it to their ride. It's just nothing but good from our perspective.
Super great, thank you. All right, well, let's talk about what Ride and Tie is, and Lonnie's going to explain to us Ride and Tie Network. She does a great job with a seminar she puts on at Old Dominion every year. And so Lonnie, take it away. Tell us what it's all about.
So Ride and Tie is a race with two people and one horse. And to put it to lay it out right at the beginning is you're following the same trail. One of the advantages of doing it with endurance ride is that everything's exactly the same. You have the same base camp as you do with an endurance ride. You're following the same trail. The horses are vetted in at the beginning of the race. They are vetted in periodically during the race, and they are vetted out at the end of the race. So that's all very similar. And the only difference is that you're too poor to have two horses. So you're having to share. And you can use, it doesn't have to be, it's a little bit different in the West as it is in the East, is from the West, since that's really where it originated. They're not more serious. They're not more competitive. It's a different, they tend to use faster, crazier horses. Since we've been doing Ride and Tie on the East Coast for the past 20 or 30 years, up until recently, our pool of riders was pretty small, so we had to use good horses to keep them all alive. It's been pretty important that the horses be cooperative and careful. So we've had people do it with Shetlands, and we've had people do it with thoroughbreds, and we've had people do it with drafts. But it's a race with two people and one horse, and you take turns running and riding. And so the race can be anywhere from 6 miles to 100 miles. What you find as a manager is that a standard race would be, say, 20 to 30 miles. but you'll get more people initially. When people want to test the waters, you'll get more people if you have a race of 5 to 6 miles, something like that, because they want to bring their kids. There's a whole lot of people who do it with their kids. They'll want to bring their kids. They want to test the waters first before they go and jump into the 20 or 30 mile distance. And the way the race is done is you start with one person running and one person riding, and you can go at any speed. You can walk, you can trot, you can run right next to each other. You can, there are rules which we'll go over later, but it's essentially is one person starts off and they say, on your mark, get set, go. And the person on the horse will walk, trot, canter, gallop ahead for say a mile or so. There's no rule that says how far you have to go. And you'll go say a mile and you'll jump off, tie the horse to a tree and run off down the trail. And the second person will come staggering along and they'll come up, find the correct horse. And it sounds sort of funny to say that, but when you're running on the trail, you tend to be staring at the ground. So you have to be sure to be looking up periodically, find your horse, untie the horse, which has wrapped itself around the tree, and you're cursing and whacking on it. And then you manage to get on the horse and you leapfrog down the trail that way as you'll either pass your rider and continue down the trail a little way, tie the horse and start running. Or most commonly what'll happen is when they catch with the first rider, they will do what's called a flying tie, is that the first person will jump off and or the second person will jump off the horse. The first person will get on and they'll just continue on down the trail that way. And is one thing that, as everybody has said so far, the panelists, is how much fun this is. And you can imagine the why it's so much fun is you just can't take yourself seriously. Is if you can imagine trying to go to a foot race, and you go to a foot race and trying to get yourself there and trying to get everything together, that's pretty complicated. And if you try to go to an endurance ride and you try to get everything together and everything there, that's super complicated to have to actually get to the start line. And with ride and tie, pretty much everything goes out the window because you've got two people and one horse trying to accomplish the same goal. And you just spend most of your time laughing and not getting lost, but running backwards, running forward. It gets pretty funny because things happen that don't happen to normal people. So you really can't take yourself seriously, which is why the ride and tires have so much fun. Another aspect of ride and tie that we have is something called an equithon. And it's what we have is, instead of two people doing relaying with the horse, is you have there's a distance that the horse rides, usually 15 miles, and the horse will do with one rider, only one rider, one horse. They'll do the 15-mile loop, and the runner will be waiting. And so you can either do it Ironman, you can have one person doing both the riding and the running, or you can do it with two different people. And when the horse comes in, once the horse meets pulse parameters, then the runner can take off. And so that's a way that you can either, if you don't have a partner, you can do an equithon with just, if you don't have a running partner and you want to do this, is you can just ride the horse section and then do the running section afterwards. Or if you have somebody who's a really great runner but is not so convinced about the horse, then they can also participate out there on the trails. Anyway, you can have team members who are maybe not as strong in both departments but want to come out here and have fun. And so that's where the equithon comes in.
I call equithon the gateway drug into ride and tie, because sometimes runners get in and who don't know how to ride horses and do that running loop, or riders who aren't sure they want to run, and that kind of gets them in. Panelists, anything you want to add about ride and tie that maybe we missed, or anything that you think we ought to talk about? All right, well then we're gonna move. Oh, Carol.
Nope.
Oh, okay. Okay. All right. Well, we're gonna move to rules, and Lonnie's gonna help us with that as well.
So, and going a little bit more as far as the race managers go, is the race distances. If you're having a race, you're having an endurance ride, the race distances for ride and tie are usually determined by the length of your trail loops that you already have. I mean, our whole goal in ride and tie is to not add to your workload, because your workload is already pretty stupendous as a race manager. So we say, if you tell us you have this length loop, that's how long our race is. And if we want to do a longer one, then we'll either do 2 loops, or you'll find us a way to shorten the first loop, something like that. But the race distances, so that's, it's not that the race distances are flexible, but if you tell us you have a 14-mile loop, an 11-mile loop, we say, okay, our short distance is 14 miles and our long distance is 25 miles, and they do both loops. So we totally work with whatever you have. And the start times are also what we do is we juggle them because if you're having to move your staff around, if you say, well, we won't have any veterinarians back at base camp until 11 a.m., then we say, okay, then the ride and tie doesn't start until 9 a.m. or something. So we totally work with what your existing layout is to make it work for you, so you don't have to add any personnel, and you can have the veterinarians and staff in place. You don't have to add any extra ones. And again, if you're looking at the distances, as Carol has said, is the first time you host a ride and tie, there will be a great many interested people, but not a whole lot of takers because they want to see it happen at first. And so it's very common to have maybe 1 or 2 people come. And if you have a shorter distance, if you do have a 5 or 6 mile distance, you'll get more people to come and they'll think, whoa, that was easy. That took me a total of 45 minutes. I could come for longer next time. So it's very easy to get people to extend, to do more races once they come to the first one. So we do have the ride and tie rules are on the website. There's a total of 19 ride and tie rules, and we try very, very hard not to add rules unless it's necessary. I mean, we're all about, let's be logical, let's be civil, let's be normal here. So our rules are pretty much no medications, no pregnant mares. The horses do have to be 5 years old in order to compete. The horses have to have a pre-ride vet check. So all of these rules are on the website, and they're all very logical. And so there's a few of them that say that the teams must switch at least 6 times during the entire race. You may switch 30 times. I mean, if you have a 30-mile race, you may switch 30 times. And in fact, what you find is you move much faster if you switch more often, because then everybody can move at a faster pace. Because a lot of times people will say, oh, I think I'm going to ride the horse 5 miles, and then I'll be 5 miles ahead of everybody, and then I will start to run. But then what happens is the horse is standing there for a long time waiting for his second runner to come along. So what you do find is that the more you switch, the quicker you move down the trail. So you have to switch at least 6 times, but you'll find that you do switch a whole lot more. There does need to be an exchange at the vet check, and that means that the person who rides the horse in has to run out back out onto the trail. And there's other basic rules that, like, don't tie your horse in the middle of the trail, and both people can't use the horse at the same time. So that does mean that one person can't be riding the horse and one person tailing it, or obviously most people can't ride the horse at the same time. And you have to follow the rules are really pretty basic, is that you have to follow the trail. Everybody has to follow the trail. If you go off trail, you have to go back. The rules are very similar to endurance. You have to go back to the point where you went off the trail and resume where you're going there. So it doesn't matter how long, some people might run a mile in between changes. Some people might run 2 mile between changes. People like me might run a quarter mile between changes. It doesn't matter as long as all 3 team members, the 2 people and the horse, cross the finish line. That's when your finish time is. So if one person gets way ahead and finishes, and it takes 2 hours for the second person to come in, that's when your finishing time is when the third person of the team, or the third member of the team, comes across the finish line. But other than that, the rules are some of them. The rule that seems to be the most confusing when you as a ride manager, if you look at the rules, is it says artificial ties are illegal, and you spend a great deal of time discussing, is a telephone pole an artificial tie? Is what constitutes an artificial tie? And the rules state that an artificial tie is anything that does not exist along the trail for all participants to tie to. So that means that you can't. So what the rules say is you can't take a stake and carry it along with you to pound into the ground to tie your horse to. But if there's a telephone pole along the trail and that's what everybody ties to, that's not an artificial tie. We're so lucky here on the East Coast is we have more trees than we have people. So we have no issues with how to tie and where to tie. There have been times when we've been out west and ride management has, for instance, parked a horse trailer, parked a stock trailer out on the trail for everybody to tie to, because if all there is sagebrush. And I can tell you from a Virginia rider, is that sagebrush doesn't work. I've been there, and an endurance rider had to catch my horse as it trotted away, dragging its sagebrush. But so there have been races where management will park something out there so everybody has at least one solid object to tie to. But that's what an artificial tie is that the runners can't create, like the runners can't park a pickup truck out there and say, this is my truck, no one else can tie to it. And that seems to be the rule that causes the most confusion, because one of the rules is that hand ties are permitted if race management permits it. And that just means that the competitors can park somebody out on the trail. It's usually in the first mile when things are a little bit more chaotic, or in the first 2 miles or so. The competitors may park somebody out on the trail and say, you stand here and hold horses. And so that's what a hand tie is. And the race manager can say hand ties are allowed in the first mile or the first half mile or the first 2 miles. And so that if you actually have any remaining friends after your career in endurance, you can send them out there and say, my horse is going to be a little nutty at the first switch. Can you please stand at the 1 mile point? So that's what a hand tie is. But other than that, the rules are very self-explanatory.
Good. Panelists, anything you want to add?
Don Betts used to say that our rules are 1 page, and if you want to add another rule, you got to take one of them away.
Yeah.
So I was fortunate to have Don and Annie kind of start the whole ride and tie thing with Bandit Springs, and so we got a really nice start. And that's what he used to say about rules.
And I would assume those of you that have put on rides, and I have as well, you would say that the biggest thing I want ride managers to hear is ride and tie is so similar to ARC, and Lonnie made that clear. You're not gonna have, it's not that different. So you're not going to learn a whole new system. Melissa, did you want to say something?
I would agree with that. It's not, the rules are very straightforward and very simple. There's not really a lot of adjustments that you have to make to the endurance ride as it already exists. And riding tires are pretty easygoing. So they just tend to blend in well. And I've not found that rules and regulations have really been an issue at all at the riding ties that we had posted.
Good, thank you. All right, well, let's talk a little bit now about if you want to add a ride and tie to your event. And you've already heard several times, we are going to be flexible. It's not going to change much at all of what you do. We will use the same course. We're going to use the same vets. You've already had to mark the course. You've already had to pay for your vets or get your vets in. Everything's going to be very similar, so you're not going to add a whole lot. You can figure out how you want to do it. You can offer it on a separate day. You can offer it with an endurance ride. This may surprise you, but many riding tires, myself included, really like when we can compete over 2 or even 3 days consecutively, because we can pile up the miles that way. And that's we're working for year-end points just like everybody else is in AARC. Or just working to have fun. It's also pretty common for folks to do an endurance ride one day and a ride and tie the next, and that gives them that opportunity. And so that's good. So again, you can start at the same time as endurance, but more often, because you do have runners on the ground, and the starts of all races are a little bit crazy. If you do a 20-minute buffer in there, that probably would work best. So let's say the 50 milers go out at 7, 50 miler endurances go out at 7, and maybe the 25-mile ride and tie goes out at 7:15, and then maybe your LD starts at 7:30, and then if you're doing a smaller ride and tie race, a 10-mile race, so it go out at 7:45, something like that, or you could space it by half an hour, 7, 7:30, 8, however you want to do it. But the start tends to be a little better to not have it all together. But out on trail, it's actually fun to get to see the endurance riders and chat with them. And they always tease us about, why would you take a perfectly good horse and tie it to a tree and run away from it, and that kind of thing. And I have had just almost no problems in my experience being on trail with the other horses. Most of your riding tie runners are going to step off the trail and let the endurance runners come on through. Several times I've had endurance riders thank me for being out there, because they say it's kind of good for a horse to be tied to a tree and me have to train my horse how to run past this weird thing they've never seen before, or this runner on the trail or whatever. And so I've never had any trouble really at all with that. And then you do have to sanction your event with Ride and Tie. However, over the next 2 years, if you're going to do that, Ride and Tie is going to offer ride managers a subsidy to help you with your expenses, which are pretty minimal anyway. But we do want to offer that carrot to you to convince you to try to offer a ride and see if you can't get the Ride and Tie to work as well. And so let me talk just briefly about how you go about sanctioning. And you can find it on our website, very easy, rideandtie.org. Or you can get in touch with me, and you can find my contact information on the Ride and Tie website. It's also going to be on the last slide tonight. And there's my emails right there on the screen now. One of the rules is, for it to be an officially sanctioned Ride and Tie race, you have to have at least a distance of 20 miles or more. Now, that doesn't mean you have to have an entrant in that race. And so if you offer a 20-mile race and you get 3 teams that want to do the 10-mile race, you're fine. You didn't have to have a 20-mile team. You just had to have the 20-mile distance. We also offer an elevator option. I don't know, does ARC do elevators? I don't know if they do or not. Okay, they do. The way that ours work are, go ahead, Melissa.
Yes, AERC still does offer elevator distances, yes.
Okay, so it's probably very similar. When you come in, let's say that your first loop is 10 miles and you're trying to decide, do I want to elevate up to the 25 and do another 14-mile loop? Once you commit to the elevator, you either are going to complete or not. You can't then, when you come back in, if you get pulled, you couldn't say, well, I want the completion for the 10-mile. You give that up when you go. But a lot of teams enjoy the elevator because they just don't know. And they say, let's try 10. And if we're still feeling pretty good and the horse is doing good, we'll go back out. And so that is an option. And that's part of the sanctioning process. You let us know whether or not you want to elevate or not. One rule, which is also similar to AERC, is in order to participate, you have to be a member of the Ride and Tie Association. And that's primarily for insurance purposes, but also that membership does have its privileges, and you'll get our newsletter and you'll get other opportunities to being a member is a good thing. And if you've never done a Ride and Tie before, your first year of membership is free. And so there's no reason not to. And if you put on a ride, you also get a free membership. And ride managers also must be members of Ride and Tie, again, because the insurance will only cover you if you're a member of Ride and Tie. But the free membership for ride managers is for every year you do one. It's not just your first year, and so there's no reason not to. So if you're gonna plan it, we've already mentioned a little bit about the rules, and that's on the website. We have a schedule on the website very similar to AERC's, and you go to the schedule and then you can click on for the flyer or click on a tab for the entrance, which is just like most of the ARC races go, and you can print out your entry and mail it in. And we are working on some online stuff, as AERC is as well, and some of the races will begin now having an online option as well. If you get to me your entry flyer and also your with whatever information you need or want on there, and as much you can put the better, of course, and also get to me your entry form, then I'll make sure it gets on the website and that'll get promoted that way. I would also very much encourage you to join the 2 Facebook pages. There's just a Ride and Tie Facebook page, and then there's also an East Coast Ride and Tie Folks. And even if you're on the East Coast, join that one. Ask any questions. It's a great community. People be happy to share with you whatever. If you're going to have a race, even though you have your AERC insurance, you're also going to have Ride and Tie insurance. The AERC insurance is not going to cover the Ride and Tie, and of course, vice versa. However, the insurance is incredibly reasonable. It is $10 a team, but not more than $100 a day. And so if you have 20 teams, it's going to be $100. If you have 1 team, it's going to be $10. And so it's very reasonable, and your entry fees will more than cover that, particularly when you consider that you already have your course marked, you already have your vets taken care of, that kind of thing. Beyond your liability insurance and your whatever you have to spend a little extra for completion prizes and that kind of thing, everything else is just basically pure profit for you. Wonderful thing with our insurance is if you let me know up to 24 hours before the race, we can cancel, and you have no entrance, we can cancel that race and there'll be no cost for insurance. And actually, to be honest, you wouldn't have a cost anyway because Riding Tie is subsidizing it. However, to help us with our expenses, because if you have no entrance, you have no fee. But if you'll let me know, that'll keep us from having to have any expenses as well. So Lonnie's now gonna talk a little bit about the pre-ride briefing that you might do with folks and the vet checks and then the post-ride. And I'll do the post-ride. So Lonnie, if you'll do pre-ride and vet checks.
So the pre-ride briefing is, again, just exactly the same as with the endurance rides. And the only thing Nick Kohut here on the East Coast is very good about telling everybody, and most people, both on the East and the West Coast, have seen Riding Tie and they know what's happening. But people will still, when you're plodding around or running down the trail, people will still say, "Are you okay?" They're always saying, "Are you okay? Where's your horse?" And what you do want to tell people is that the first thing is that don't be alarmed if you find a horse tied to a tree, and please do not bring it back in. Please leave it tied to the tree unless it's better than yours and yours will stay tied. Then swapping, hey, stuff happens. But two things are, one of them is if you find a horse tied to a tree, that's what it's doing there. And the second thing is the Riding Tie horses don't have any mandatory holds. They don't have any half-hour holds or gate into a hold because they spend a lot of their time standing still tied to a tree. And so what'll happen is the horse, will canter for 6 minutes and then stop and stand tied to a tree for 5 minutes. So they're resting constantly along the trail. And so they don't have any mandatory holds in the check. And so when you have so at the beginning, just the same as everybody else is they will pull in with their trailers. You'll tell them where to park. You will say, of course, we're not doing pre-ride briefings anymore. So most of us are doing written briefings before and handing them out to people before. But they will have the exact same thing as you'll say, this is your ride distance. This is where the course map is. This is what the pulse criteria is. And here on the East Coast, our pulse criteria is the same as for the endurance ride. When Riding Tie started out west, I'm not sure what they're doing out there now, because the horses were resting so much along the trail, is that they ran at higher parameters. Is that, again, and Melissa could tell us more about this, but when we first started going out west, maybe the pulse parameters might have been 72, something like that. But the horses didn't have to cool down as much. They didn't have to cool down and stand there. Is they basically were checked out by a vet, then headed back out on the trail and did all their resting out on the trail. So the pre-ride briefing is, again, we're going to tell you what time the Riding Tie starts. If you're going to have to be crossing creeks, if you're going to have to be crossing rivers, things like that. And one of the things we do for the endurance riders is say, since the horses don't have a mandatory hold, if there's a line at the vet check, so if when you come to the arrival time or you pass the pulse, if there's a line at the vet check, what we ask is that the Riding Tie horses be allowed to go to the front of the line, because what happens is that the first runner will come in and the runners have to, one of the rules of Riding Tie is that the team members, the two team members have to handle the horse. And so a crew can definitely help cool the horse and help crew the horse at the check, but the horse has to be vetted by a team member. So what generally happens is that the first runner will ride in, they'll jump off the horse, they'll hand the horse to the crew. If you have one, not everybody has a crew. They'll refill their water bottle or eat, have a snack, something like that, and then blast right back out on the trail. They might be there no more than a minute or so. And meanwhile, the crew is cooling the horse, feeding the horse. And if the Riding Tie teams have done this right, the second member is not far behind the first member, so the horse might not have 5 or 10 minutes to have a snack, cool off, things like that. We don't usually untack the horse because it's such a fast switch, is that they don't stay for very long. So usually with the veterinarians, they'll allow us to not untack the horses and go on. But what happens is that the first person is already out there running. So if they have a 10 to 15 minute lead on the horse, it might take that horse half an hour going pretty hard to catch the first runner. So that's why we don't have a mandatory hold, is it all the benefit is taken away because the horse has to run so hard to catch the first runner. So that's why we do ask if it's okay for the Riding Tie horses to essentially cut in line. And there's, again, the run so far in our 20 or 30 years of doing this, the endurance riders have never said no. They're always like, "Woo, you don't look so good. You go on and move along." So those are pretty much the only things we do differently with the vetting.
And then take us, and Melissa, please chime in as well. Take us through the vet check as well.
So the vet checks are, again, exactly the same. Is the first person will ride the horse in, or it's not uncommon at all to have the people come in together. There's absolutely nothing wrong if somebody has a brand new horse, if somebody has a horse that they want to get into the sport, but they're not positive that it's going to tie well at, while the other horses run past it. You have a couple of choices. Is that either the two of you can stay together, so both, and that limits you to the speed of the runner, but that's okay. It's safe. It's fine. Everybody has a good time. The horse doesn't get excited, and you're never leaving it tied to the tree, and the horse gets it. And it's a rare horse. It's a very, very rare horse that doesn't figure out pretty darn quick that this is a really super sport, because you get to run and stop, run and stop, and run and stop. And it's no trotting up every mountain and trotting down every mountain. The horses, everyone always says, the endurance riders say, I've never seen a happier group of horses, because the horses, number one, are busy laughing at their runners. Is they say, you look like garbage. The horses think it's very funny how bad the runners look. But once they figure out what happens with horses in ride and tie, at the very first ride and tie, you on your mark, get set, go, you go a mile, you stop and tie the horse, and the horse thinks you've lost your mind, and it screams and screams and screams and runs around in circles. And then the second person comes along, unties the horse, and you usually do 2 ties where the horse thinks that this is the dumbest thing they've ever done in their life. And by the third tie, the horse, when you tie it, the horse will ignore you, and it will turn and look back down the trail at the next runner coming, because they've already figured out that somebody else is coming. And so very, very quickly, the horses learn that this is a super sport, because you get to stop, stand, run, and just have a really good time. So it's a rare horse that doesn't figure this out. We do have, so there are 2 things you can do. Is you can either, the 2 runners can stay together and keep the horse company, or if you can get 4 people and 2 horses who want to go together, that's one of the easiest thing to do, is just get 2 teams to run together side by side. And we've had people help us a lot when we've had horses who are a little new to it, is if you just have 2 teams run side by side, and then the 2 horses will always be tied together. They are competing. They're one of the rules for ride and ties. There's no unentered horses on the course, just as exactly as ARC. So there are no random people out there. But if you do have 2 entered teams, they can ride side by side during the entire time. And we've done that up to 100-mile rides, and it's great to have the company, and the horses are totally happy. So that's a couple ways where horses can learn how to do ride and tie. There is, again, a mandatory exchange in the vet check. Is whoever brings the horse in has to run out, and whoever runs in has to ride out. So there have been times when, for instance, the runner gets ahead of the horse, and if the runners, you can have some pretty fast runners out there. If the runner comes into the vet check because the terrain is very difficult, or it's super hot and the horse is having to be careful, if the runner comes in first, they just have to wait. They have to wait until the horse comes in. They can't keep running down the trail. They have to wait so they can make a change at the vet check. And again, we leave the tack on for the vet checks, just because the time they spend in the vet check is very, very fast. Team members, again, have to vet the horse. The crew can cool the horse and feed it, but the team members do have to pulse and vet the horse.
And I would add, and Melissa, you may want to add too, your head vet has all the authority. They can set however they want to set it. So they can set heart rates, all that, just like they do for the endurance horses. And if they say, no, it's a really hot day, we want them to take their tack off, we will do that. It's just whatever the head vet says is going to go. But these are general guidelines, but ultimately it's going to be up to the vet's discretion. Melissa or the other panelists, anybody want to add anything to any of that?
Yeah, I would just make a comment that I would say even out west now, the criteria has come down to meet the criteria that's standard at vet checks. As Lonnie said, it used to be in the West when Ride and Tie first started, the criteria was quite high, 72 beats per minute. But with time, and we have reduced that to meet the criteria of the endurance ride. And the vetting is really no different, other than we do typically leave the tack on. And, I agree with Lonnie. Typically, the horses in Ride and Tie look really good. And I think a big part of that is Jim Steer used to always point out that, these horses in Ride and Tie move like horses in nature do. The horses in nature, if you watch them, the wild horses, they move fast and then stop and rest, move fast and stop and rest. And so I think it's just more natural with what horses do well. And that's why I think the Ride and Tie horses tend to look so good.
Super, thank you. One other thing I would add, that at the end of Lonnie's talk about the horses, how quick they get it. By about the third race, they start picking their own trees. It's amazing. My horses do. And I don't know if I am cueing them without realizing it, but when I start looking for a tree, they'll just nose right up to a tree. Or sometimes they're just like, I'm tired here. Let's stop here. And sometimes it's like, no, we got to keep going. Our horse Kevlar, we trained on the course at a Gallop on the Greenway. Carol, who's one of our panelists, at her race last year, he had never done Ride and Tie, and we took him out on the 10, I think it was a 10-mile race. And that was his first experience with Ride and Tie, and he just did beautifully. And I'm pretty sure he's going to be the SCRA rookie Ride and Tie horse of the year this year. I'm kind of proud of him. Well, let's talk a little bit now about after the ride. And let me kind of back up and say, as the sanction officer, pre-ride, in order to get sanctioned, you really just have one piece of paper you have to fill out. And it's going to be your name and address, the race name and where it takes place, and then all of the landowners that the race is going to cover. And sometimes that's just one, if you're in the national forest or whatever, or if you're going across private land. We just need all the landowners' names. And then I submit that to the insurance company, and they will issue a certificate of insurance that will cover you and the landowners for damage to the land, and also as a medical payment and all of that kind of thing in case there are liability issues. And then when the ride is over, just like the endurance, you want to do some kind of a post-ride briefing or award ceremony. And there's no reason, I would encourage you to make that part of your endurance, not a separate ceremony, but both the pre-ride briefing and the post-ride. It can just be part of that as well. Offer a completion award, if you will. It's less important, in my opinion, and y'all can tell me what you think, that you have super wonderful, nice prizes for the first place and all that kind of thing, because you're probably going to have a tremendously fewer number of competitors. You may start 35 or 40 or whatever LDs or 50 miles, and you may have just 2 or 3 or 8 or 10 Ride and Tie teams. And if you're trying to give really nice premium prizes for your endurance race, I would not expect for Ride and Tie that you would do the same, because it's just fewer teams. But something, and then like is listed here, a ride photo with a frame or horse gear or whatever will be fine as a first place prize. And then you can do completion award. If you have, is it more than 5 teams, Lonnie, where you can do the best condition? Is it 5 or?
I don't know. I don't think there's a specific cutoff. I think it's,
Okay.
Yeah, I don't think there's.
In AERC, you got to have at least 11 to do a BC. Anyway.
Yeah, you can have less than 11, but I don't know that you get the full points possibly for
Okay. Well, for Ride and Tie, there's no year-end points or any other year-end advantages for BC. It would just be for that particular race. But that would be optional. You're welcome to offer it, but obviously not not essential. So then the race is all the way over. You filled out your original paperwork and you got that to me, and you did the entry form and the entry flyer and all, and you got that to me. All that got posted. You had your race. You got your insurance information from me. And then when it's all over with, and I will provide you with all of these forms. There's not that many, but it's a few forms. There'll be a form where you put the results on there so that we can make sure that we do credit people for what they've done. There'll be a financial summary, which will include, on day 1, we had X number of teams times $10, and that's how much that is, or up to a maximum of $100 for that day. If you've had first time members, then you have a membership form. And then if they were not first time members, but needed to rejoin, you need to collect that fee for us. And then I already mentioned the insurance fee, and on the form, it tells you where to send it. It all goes to the Ride and Die Association. And then you don't actually have to provide us with the entry forms, that would be for you. What we just need is the results, the financial summary, and any membership forms that you might have gotten. And so that part again is very, very easy. I think it's within 10 days after the race, we want you to try to get that to us. And that's good for you and good for us. If I let something go beyond 10 days, it probably is never gonna happen. And so that's probably a good thing. That is all that we have to present, except let me ask again our panelists, anything that you think we need to make sure that we mention? Whoops, I didn't mean to do that. Panelists, anything else?
I have some input, Courtney.
Sure.
So when we held the World Championship race, what I noticed was, first of all, riding tires camp intense more than LQs. And so, you kind of take that into consideration. Also, we tended to get a lot of folks, not a lot, but more than normal, a lot of folks who hadn't ridden before or ridden much. And so we noted that there was some care of the horses that they weren't aware of, that, I know you're only 2.5 miles from camp, but you need to let your horse drink. And also we had issues with people who are used to running and just throwing their trash on the trail. And I don't think that's normal. I think that we had quite a few teams, and we just probably had people who were runners they normally do that. And so we have had to, make requests just so that people know what our expectations are on behavior and stuff like that.
Super, thank you. Anybody else?
Yeah, as a ride manager, I would encourage you, if you're thinking about adding Ride and Tide to your ride, to really think about it, because what we found is not only did it add a fun group of people and add energy to the event, but financially it works for the ride. There's very little added expense. I mean, you already have your completion awards, you have your camp, you have your vets, you have your trail. So there's very little added expense, and then you just get the benefit of the additional entry fees. So that's a great benefit to the ride. I would say some ride managers may be hesitant to add a Ride and Tide because they may be concerned it might make their endurance riders a bit nervous having people run and race by them. But to mitigate that, what we've done, because out west we do have some ride tires that move along pretty fast. And so what we typically will do is either start the Ride and Tires on a different loop than the endurance ride, or start them prior to the endurance ride, so they're not racing past the riders. And then at the rider meeting, we assure the riders that the Ride and Tires will be polite and respectful of the endurance riders on the trail and not get concerned about them racing by. And then we ask the Ride and Tires, if it's clear that they're in an area that there shouldn't be tying, meaning it's a narrow trail, for example, where their horse may block the trail. Sometimes we'll even put up signs, it's a no tie zone, just to make it clear not to tie there so you're not blocking the other horses on the trail. But I'd have to say, when we have added the Ride and Ties to the rides, it's just been a very positive experience. In general, Ride and Tires are very low maintenance. They don't come with big expectations. They just want a marked trail and water, and they're good to go. So they're not really a lot of additional work at all, and they're a lot of fun.
Thank you.
And I even had the benefit not in 2020, but 2019, I had somebody who wanted to go out for a run the next day after she'd done the Ride and Tie, and she unmarked 20 miles of trail on foot. So I thought that was awesome.
one of our hopes in Riding Tie is that, or I should say, we are a East Coast, West Coast organization, and there's not a lot in the middle. And so part of what we're hoping is to get more in the middle, and that's starting to happen. And I think also to get some more of the West Coast AERC rides to pick up Riding Tie as well. We do a fairly decent job in the East Coast. I would say more than half, probably more like 75% or more of the Riding Ties I do are in conjunction with an ARC race or ride. Riding Ties race, ARC is ride. I always get that. I always have to be careful. If you are somewhere in the middle, I want you to know that there are people I hear all the time from people who want to do Riding Tie, and they say, but there's nothing for thousands of miles away from me. Just this week, I got a message from a person who lives in Florida, is going to do the Gallop on the Greenway at the end of this year that Carol is hosting. And then she's moving to Colorado. And she said, what do you have for me in Colorado? And right now, there's no Riding Tie in Colorado, but there are AERC rides in Colorado. And so I said, I will work with you, and I'll talk with the ride managers out there and see what we can do. But if you're a ride manager, wherever you are, I can almost assure you there are people that would like to give it a shot, not too far from you. And you don't really have much to lose. What you're actually going to get is a subsidy, even if you don't end up getting any entrants. As long as you'll try hard to promote it and to make it happen, we're going to give you the subsidy. So it's kind of like Melissa said, financially, it's to your advantage. You're going to get extra entry fees. Assuming you have participants, you're going to get the subsidy, and everything else you've got to do anyway. And so there's just no reason not to give it a shot. I'm assuming, Melissa, there aren't no questions came in. Is that correct?
That is correct. I do not see any questions. If anybody has any questions, just to remind you, you can type them in on the chat and we'd be happy to answer them. Currently, don't see any questions.
Okay. Anybody else have anything you need to add, or if not, we will sign off, I guess.
I did. Go ahead.
All right. One thing as a ride manager, which Carol has seen, is, again, especially if you're in the middle of the country, is you may not get entrance the first year and don't give up. Is that if you advertise a Riding Tie and you have people question you or ask questions and act interested, but no one actually signs up, don't give up, because it's the second and the third years where they'll all come. It takes a little bit to get it going, so don't stop the first year. Keep going, and the people will come.
Yeah, I've just been trying to open the door, and so I think some people are going to start walking in. I knew there had to be a hotbed in Ocala, and I think I may have finally bumped into the right person that's trying to get some people going. But one thing I have to say about the Riding Tires is that they are happy and they don't whine. And some days that's a really good thing for a ride manager.
Okay, we did. Oh, okay. Yep. Kathleen was just saying, thanking us and saying that if you have any other questions, you can get them to the ARC office or to me. You see my email and phone number right there, or Lanny or Lonnie or anybody else. All right. Well, thank you guys so much for being a part of this, and let us know how we can help. We want to help, and we will.
Thanks.
Thanks, everybody.